Hey, how is everybody today? Happy Sunday. I am a little bit late getting on. I had a little bit of a problem. I went to go turn our live on earlier, like at 3 or 4 o'clock today, and um, just to kind of warn anybody, hello there, love bug. We have got to get together and figure out how to make you a mod. Okay, so uh, I'm going to try and send you something personally so we can talk. Um, let's see. Add as a moderator. Can manage blocked words, change chat modes. All right. Here, we're going to put you in there, Miss Lovebug. Let's see. And I will figure it out as we go. But just to warn anybody else, so they don't go through what I have went through the last few hours. I had went, thank you, Lovebug. I had went to the to find the Letcher County Sheriff's Department page the other night when we were doing our live. I was looking up Letcher County Sheriff's Office and it wasn't pulling anything up. And then whoever it was let me know that they had pulled it up and they found it when I thought it was gone. So last night I was laying there thinking in bed, and it just kind of dawned on me that I was looking up sheriff's office and not sheriff's department. So today I went to go pull it up and I put in Letcher County Sheriff's Department and it came up. But it's not the same one. The one that comes up, the very last post on that was from 2018. And if I'm not mistaken, because it didn't say anything on there about Mickey, everything that I saw still had pictures of Danny Webb, the old sheriff. And over to the side where it had the about page and stuff, it had a sheriff's office website link. So I went and clicked on that link for the Letcher County Sheriff's Office. Don't anybody else ever do that because it is a virus. It went all through my stuff. So I was in panic mode trying to get it back off of my computer, and it took me several hours of going through and deleting it. It was awful. It pulled up McAfee, and it just kept dinging, dinging, dinging. It was crazy. So don't anybody go to that Facebook page for Letcher County Sheriff's Office or Sheriff's Department and click on that website for their sheriff's department because it won't even take you there anyway. All it does is infect your computer. So this live, what I wanted to do is kind of go through the Delphi case in Delphi, Indiana. If you are a true crime buff like I am, then you already know about this case. But I wanted, and the trial just started, but they're not allowing any cameras in the courtroom. So all we're going to get are updates from people who are in there. So everybody come on in. We got Lovebug now, an official mod for the channel. Thank you, honey. Thank you. Cat Lover 33. Hey, hey, LS. Hi, everyone. Let's see. Christine Fortunato. Hi. Cat Lover. Major cluster. Yeah, it was. Well, hi, Miss Christine. I'm new to your channel, honey. You just come on in. I was also because I just use YouTube's kind of platform stream. And I had been going through a couple of the other streaming services, Restream and StreamYard. Those services let you kind of put the comments up on the screen and all that kind of stuff. But with one of them, you only have like 2 hours a month of stream time. So I'm kind of just trying to see which one will be best to buy, because it looks like not everything free is the best. The cheapest is not always best. So we've got Whispers in the Wind. Greetings, everybody. Yes, ma'am. Come on in. Come on in. And I'm going to pull up, since everybody kind of, I'm guessing, knows what we're talking about, but I'm still going to pull up a couple things here. And one of the things that I had trouble with myself, I didn't know which one was Libby and which one was Abby. And so I wanted to show us. Can you guys see everything fine? So this one is Libby. This is Libby German, the little blonde-haired one. And so then so I guess then Abby is the little red-haired girl. And here is one of the posters. Seeking information. Let's see. Seeking information for Liberty German, Delphi, Carroll County, Indiana. On February 13th, 2017, Liberty German, age 14, and Abigail Williams, age 13, were hiking on the Delphi Historic Trail near the Monon High Bridge, just east of Delphi in Carroll County, Indiana. Liberty and Abigail were reported missing to police after their parents were unable to locate them at the pickup location. Volunteers subsequently discovered the girls' bodies in the woods east of Delphi in Carroll County, Indiana, on February 14th, 2017. Investigators have distributed a photo of the person observed on the Delphi Historic Trail. The photo appears to depict a white male wearing blue jeans, a blue coat or jacket, and a hoodie. During the course of the investigation, evidence has led investigators to believe the aforementioned person is suspected of being involved in the unaliving of Liberty and Abby. Anyone with information is to call them, of course. And I wanted to pull this one up. And you guys let me know if you cannot hear it, please.
To update you here on the Delphi murders trial that started this week. Back in 2017, two young teenage girls were brutally murdered, and now the suspect in that case is being tried for double murder. We want to go out to Fox News' Garrett Tenney with the latest. Let's listen in.
There have been a lot of twists and turns in this case over the past 7.5 years, and that is continuing as this trial gets underway. Prosecutors say this case is about three things. First, the brutal murder of two young girls, Abby Williams and Libby German. Second, the man Abby took video of on her phone before she disappeared, known as the Bridge Guy. And third, an unspent bullet casing found at the scene between the girls' bodies that allegedly matched a gun owned by Richard Allen. The 52-year-old's defense argues he is truly innocent and that there is plenty of reasonable doubt in the case against him. This week, the defense revealed that a strand of hair found around Abby Williams' finger didn't belong to either of the girls and did not match Richard Allen's DNA. Today, his team suggested there's also evidence showing that while Allen was on the Monon High Bridge Trail the afternoon the girls went missing in February 2017, he had already left by the time Abby and Libby got there. One big turn in the case this morning, even before the jury arrived, Judge Francis Gohl ruled the defense will not be allowed to show the two vastly different composite sketches police released of a suspect in 2017 and then in 2019, which the defense argued are relevant because neither sketch resembles Richard Allen. This trial is scheduled to run Monday through Saturday over the next 4 weeks. No cameras or electronics are allowed in the courtroom. And if the jury finds Richard Allen guilty, he faces up to 130 years in prison. In Delphi, Indiana, I'm Garrett Tenney, Fox 32, Chicago.
All right. We always appreciate those updates from Garrett Tenney as the trial continues on even today. You heard there Monday through Saturday. They will be continuing that one. But we want to continue to talk about this case here, highly in demand. I want to bring in our next guest. This is criminal defense attorney Randy Zellin. Randy, thanks so much for joining us on Live Now from Fox. We appreciate it.
How can a microblader make more than a doctor and only work part-time hours?
Sorry,
Think about this first.
Appreciate being on.
All right, Randy. So this is a case where it shocked so many in the country back in 2017. And then, unfortunately, there was just crickets in the case, and we did not get a suspect arrested until 2022. And I think one of the key things that a lot of people are going to be talking about in this case is that prosecutors have talked about in the past that the defendant had jailhouse confession to his wife there on a phone call. How does a defense attorney kind of back away from that?
Well, there has been a fair amount of studies done on what we call false confessions. And a false confession has been demonstrated to be the product of something as simple as, I just want to go home. And people tend to say really crazy things when they either believe that they can go home or they become so filled with hopelessness.
That was one of the big things that I think is starting to really become more awareness. There's a lot more awareness on false confessions these days. And from what we have kind of seen through this case is that Richard Allen has confessed like 60 different times he's confessed. And what they've reported was that everything that he has confessed has not been consistent with the crime scene. So things that he has confessed to just didn't match up to the crime scene. And let me go back over here and see what this defense attorney has to say about it.
That they would literally say anything just to go home. So I would imagine among the 120 some odd witnesses that the defense plans on calling somewhere, there will be a conversation about this confession truly having been false, having been fictitious, and a product of just pure hopelessness.
And Randy, also let's talk about the time from when these murders happened to when he was arrested here. Does that timeline, as far as the years that went on, does that help him in any case here as that investigation was going on?
Absolutely. Keep in mind the definition of reasonable doubt, which is simply the jury needing more information. A 5-year lapse in time between the date of these horrific acts and this defendant's this defendant's arrest, in and of itself is reasonable doubt. What went on for 5 years? What took the police so long? Maybe there is someone else who's done it, and the defense will be presenting proof. One instance of this ritualistic, paganistic act, these murders, where the judge preliminarily said, nope, you can't do that. But apparently the judge is going to leave open the possibility for the judge's decision that her mind to be changed. In addition, apparently there's going to be some proof of a cell phone conversation involving someone who was previously convicted of as a sex offender who subsequently passed away, that surely will build in some reasonable doubt as to whether or not we have the right person.
They had two different people that could have been suspects. So you had the man whose property they found the girls on. He passed away after they found the girls, and so he's no longer here. But they looked into him, and then they also, Richard Allen, just to kind of update anybody who's not familiar with this, Richard Allen he reported himself that he was on the bridge that day, that he had went up there, and the clothing that he was wearing was very similar to what we see on the bridge guy. And so let's see. I don't want to say anything wrong, so let's see if what.
And also keep in mind, the defense is going to be harping on, oh, you think you have the right guy? Here is a guy who hid, if you will, in plain sight, who remained a member of the community for those 5 years. Why in God's name would someone who committed these acts stick around for 5 years? So I do think that the passage of time, the fact that there is at least one other person who perhaps should have been more seriously considered as a suspect, coupled with this man remaining in the community, serving the community as a pharmacist, you got some built-in reasonable doubt there.
Now let's talk a little bit about the other evidence that prosecutors have been talking about, this unused bullet that was found in between the two girls. And they are linking that here to this suspect that was found inside of his home. How will defense attorneys try to talk that one out?
I think it will range anywhere from deflect and distract the jury's attention and have them focusing in on sloppy police work. Apparently, there was a battle, as we see oftentimes, between and amongst agencies, who should be running the show, who should be taking credit, who should be handling the investigation. So I think from somewhat of a helicopter view, the defense will try to divert the jury's attention away from that bullet and focus the jury's attention in on sloppy police paperwork, the fact the defendant remained in the community, the fact that we don't have a murder weapon, we don't have a motive, and even though motive is not an element to be proven by the prosecution, it sure is nice when someone,
if you've never
can tell, what they did. I want to point to Cat Lover 33, honey. Yes, that you're right. It was RL. I think that was Ron Logan. He was 6'5", she says, and BG was very short, no taller than 5'10". And that was something else that I was very interested in. Couldn't they take just standard math and look at that video and, like, I don't know, do all their algebraic equations and stuff and figure out how tall Bridge Guy actually is? Like, I know they have to have done something like that to be able to tell how tall Bridge Guy was.
cashed a $42,166
I'm gonna
paycheck.
have to invest in premium YouTube
can
too.
present a motive. And here there does not appear to be a clear motive, and almost as if the prosecution's going to argue that here is someone who woke up in the morning, decided, I think I'll kill some people today. Took a gun, took knives, went to the park, apparently looking for some random victims, and here you go. We have victims. Wow. That's a tough motive, and there isn't a clear motive. But I think the defense, and I'm now going to speculate, there's going to be a question, at least in my mind, whether or not the police can actually link this bullet to that gun. I know that there is scientific evidence where a discharge gun and the creation of what we call lands and grooves, where you can actually match up a gun to a casing. The question will become whether or not by what we call cycling, in other words, the bullet wasn't fired, so we don't have the creation of lands and grooves. The bullet was discharged whole, so you have the bullet and the casing was found on the ground. Whether or not there is sufficient forensic evidence and technology available to link that bullet to that gun and no other gun.
That's so interesting. And lastly, Randy, I want to talk about this audio file where there's a brief audio that was recorded from the scene, allegedly, where there is a man on there saying down the hill, and prosecutors are saying that the suspect led these two girls down a hill, and that's when they were murdered by the creek there. What kind of testing and what kind of experts will be on the witness stand there to talk about this analysis of a voice recording and trying to pin it on a certain person?
Well, one thing I can say for sure is there's one piece of evidence that has been left out of this trial, a piece of evidence that the judge has refused to permit the defense to offer. And those are sketches of the supposed person responsible for these murders. And that person does not resemble the defendant. So what did I just do for your audience? Well, number one, I tried at least to divert the listeners and the viewers' attention away from this audio file and try to focus the attention on sketches. That's also going to be, in my mind, a very clear appellate argument if, in fact, he is convicted. But as far as the audio file goes, it will be interesting to see whether or not the prosecution is going to try to offer up expert testimony to the extent that you have an audio recording, you have a voice, and to the extent that they've gotten an order calling for the defendant to have said something similar, and whether or not that's going to create a Fifth Amendment issue in terms of a right to silence, a Sixth Amendment issue, that will be another, I think, very viable grounds for appeal if, in fact, the defendant is ordered to create a similar, what we call a voice exemplar. But this is going to be a very, very difficult case, I think, for both sides. And it may very well come down to, and it's not an appropriate basis, but it may come down to this community's thirst, this jury's thirst for justice for these two kids.
Yeah, that's so true. A very complex case, a lot of years.
Okay. And then I wanted to go, let's see, I'm going to do this though. I'm going to stop sharing that because we've had trouble with it. So I'm going to reshare. So it looks like the only way we're going to know what's going on in this trial is to listen to those who are allowed in the trial. And let's see. This has the opening statements.
More than 7 years ago, Abby Williams and Libby German were murdered in the town of Delphi. 2 years ago, Richard Allen was arrested and charged with murdering the girls. Now his trial is underway in the Carroll County Courthouse, which is less than 2 miles from where those two girls were last seen alive. Thanks for joining us.
Is it good now? Okay. Yeah, sometimes it just takes
tonight
a while.
On WTHR Plus for your Delphi debrief. I'm Scott Swan. Richard Allen's trial began today with opening statements from both sides and some very emotional testimony. Our legal expert, Katie Jackson-Lindsay, joins me in studio to break down the developments. We'll get to her in a moment, but let's begin tonight with our senior investigative reporter, Bob Siegel, and Emily Longnecker, who have covered this case since it happened back in 2017. So you were both in court today. What was that like?
Well, Scott, we wish that we could actually have you and our viewers be able to see what things were like for yourselves by having cameras in the courtroom. The reality is, Judge Francis Gall ruled that cameras are not going to be allowed in the courtroom. She told us that reporters are allowed in, 12 media representatives are allowed in the courtroom. She said, you are more than welcome to take all the notes you want with pen and paper. So I've got 20 pages of notes here today.
It's a shame
Emily,
we
you've
can't
got a
see
whole
that.
bunch of
3
notes
notebooks.
today.
Trial.
And so I'm glad that we're doing these nightly events here, because our job really is to try and bring you inside the courtroom with us, since we are lucky enough to be in there to bring the feel of what's going on in the courtroom.
And it's limited who can be in there. Bob was in there this morning for several hours. I wasn't able to get in until later this afternoon on a break because there are a limited number of media passes. So we're juggling that reality too, and relying sometimes on reports from pool reporters who are coming out. And Bob and I were talking a little bit, Scott, about the challenge of reporting sometimes on things that you weren't there to hear firsthand.
Right.
That can be a challenge, right? Because you
Thank
speak with
you,
more
Ellis.
authority, I think, when you are the one
God
listening
bless you,
to that
honey.
testimony.
Absolutely. So let us set the scene for you. We're going to take you inside the courtroom to understand really day one of this trial. From my perspective, seemed like it was really to get the jury settled in to understanding their responsibility, the ground rules, and the law. And so, very first thing that happened when the jury came into the courtroom, Judge Francis Gall explained to them the jury instructions. And she spent quite a bit of the 15 minutes of jury instructions talking to the jurors about the fact that if they are going to find Richard Allen guilty, they must do so beyond a reasonable doubt. And she explained what that means. And she told them that the burden of proof is solely on the state of Indiana, on the prosecutor. And she also said that if the state fails to prove each element of the murder charges beyond a reasonable doubt, she told the jurors, you must find the defendant not guilty. From that point, the jury got to hear opening statements. And let's walk you through those a little bit. Here's some of the highlights. The Carroll County prosecutor, he warned the jury that they were going to see some gruesome crime scene photos. That didn't happen today, but that will take place here over the next week or so. He also told the jurors that they are going to hear from witnesses who will place Richard Allen at the crime scene, and that they're going to hear confessions from Richard Allen. And he said that the details from those confessions are details that only the killer would know. And he also told the jury that the last face the girls saw before their throats were slit was Richard Allen's face. Very poignant comments from the prosecutor.
I don't like this prosecutor.
The jury. Then things switched over to the defense. They got a chance to give their opening statements, and that lasted a full hour, which is what the judge allotted. So the defense team.
I also let me stop at just for a second and let you know that when this first started, after they had arrested Richard Allen, this judge, this Francine Gall or however you pronounce her last name, she kicked the defense attorneys off the case, and they ended up having to go to the Supreme Court to get reinstated back on this case. So, and they went through several different attorneys, I think, from the beginning. I don't know about several, but they went through a couple different ones. One had he'd went to the media after he was off the case and said that he thought he was completely 100% innocent of this, and that he was being used as a fall guy for it. So I think these are the original attorneys still, though, the ones that had gotten kicked off. I think they're right back on it now.
Spent their hour giving their statements, telling jurors that the state's investigation was, in their words, messed up from the very beginning. Richard Allen, they said, is truly innocent. And they also told the jurors there is reasonable doubt. And when they hear that, it's going to make the state's case fall apart before your very eyes. The jurors then got to hear actual testimony, starting with the victims' families. Libby German's sister and father explained how the day of the murders started like a normal day, making banana pancakes for Abby and Libby before dropping them off near the Monon High Bridge. They described what they were wearing and how they didn't show up at the time they were supposed to be picked up at the arranged time. The jury heard about the frantic all-night search in the dark and repeated calls to Libby, calls that went unanswered. And in the most emotional testimony of the day, Libby's grandmother, Becky Patty, told the jury about the moment she learned her granddaughter had been found in the woods. She broke down in tears and she said, "I couldn't understand why they weren't taking me to her. And then I saw the coroner's van drive by, and that's when I realized they weren't alive." The jury's also learning about the terrain around the crime scene. The state showed jurors huge posters that have aerial pictures of the Monon High Bridge and the surrounding area where the girls' bodies were found. They also got to see a video showing the jury what the walk looks like from the spot where Abby and Libby were dropped off all the way to the Monon High Bridge and across the bridge. That's an effort to try to put jurors at the scene of the crime rather than taking them out to that rough terrain to see it in person. So today was really, again, it was about allowing the jurors to hear from the families, to try and personalize the girls and to let the jurors try to get to know the girls. There were a lot of questions to the family members, tell us and explain about who the girls were. And there was emotion. I know one part that ripped my heart out during the testimony was hearing Becky Patty describe the very final conversation that she had with her granddaughter when Libby told her grandmother that she wanted to go out to the Monon High Bridge. She said, "Okay, but I want you and Abby, who was having a sleepover there that night," she said, "I want you guys to have a jacket or a sweatshirt." And she told the jury, "The last thing she said to me was, 'Grandma, I'll be okay.'" And obviously we know things did not turn out okay. You got to hear some testimony, some emotional testimony from Abby's mom in the courtroom.
Anna Williams, and this was her only child, Bob. Abby was her only child, and she testified today that she didn't even know that Abby was going to the Monon High Bridge that day. She had seen Abby the day before when she dropped her off at Libby's house to spend the night. She, she paused and teared up when she was asked to describe her daughter, her only child. She said she was a kind and helpful girl, that she was shy, that she wouldn't necessarily approach strangers, that she loved to read, that she was planning to play softball in the spring with Libby. So she talked about all of these things, and she talked about the fact that she was at work that Monday. She worked during the day, but then she had a second job at night where she worked in a local bar at the time. And she missed, she said, back-to-back calls from Becky Patty, like 3 in a row. And then she checked her phone. And then she finally took this call. And it was Becky Patty telling her, look, the girls had gone for this walk out on the bridge, and they were supposed to meet at an arranged time, and they were not there for the pickup. And that they were concerned, that they were worried. And so to put my glasses on for this, Anna said that she told her boss, "I don't know what these girls are up to, but it's probably not that big of a deal," thinking obviously that she would be back. And the defense asked her to describe her daughter's voice. I thought that was a interesting question. And she said her voice tone depended on who she was speaking to, but generally she said that Abby had a high-pitched voice. Her testimony, not as long as Becky Patty's, close to 30 minutes. The majority of her testimony came from questions that the state was asking her. And when it was the defense's turn, they only had a few questions, and then they were done.
And Emily, we want to point out to our viewers also, there were a lot of questions specifically by the defense team asking the family members of Libby and Abby about the girls' voices and about Libby in particular, her sister and her grandmother and her dad. There were questions about just how much Libby would stick up for other people, how she didn't mind calling someone out. Her grandmother said she was very polite and respectful, but if someone was out of line, she wasn't afraid to call them out. Mm-hmm. And the defense
If I'm not mistaken, who he's talking about is the blonde-haired girl, the bigger one. You know, you had Abby, who was the little tiny redhead, and then Abby was a bigger girl. And how many of us, like when her grandmother said that the last words were, "Don't worry, Grandma, I'll be okay." How many of our kids say that to us? You know, my boys say it to me all the time. "Don't worry, Mom, I'm gonna be all right."
Really kind of hit on that multiple times about saying, did
It's
she have
okay.
a
Thank
loud
you for
voice?
coming, honey.
Was she afraid to speak up? I think getting to the point and to try to get the jury to understand that perhaps put some doubt in their minds that if these girls were being attacked by someone who had a gun, they say that there was a gun, a person with a gun. They say that that person was Richard Allen ordering them to go down a hill. That I think, to
Run.
insinuate that Libby would have spoken up and she would have
I'd
fought back, or she
run.
would have done something of that sort.
I think an interesting comment that Becky Patty made also was that she said that Libby had a strong intuition. And I remember that is something that in the early days after the girls' bodies were found, Libby's grandfather, Mike Patty, saying when we learned that Libby had taken that video on her cell phone, that cell phone video, that she would have known to do that if she had had an instinct or an intuition that something wasn't right, that she likely would have known to roll video on that man that she was seeing on the bridge. So when I heard that comment today that Becky Patty made, that she had a strong intuition, it took me back to those times when I talked to Mike Patty about his granddaughter and about the fact that she had taken that stunning video when that came out. That back in the day, right. That was I mean, it kind of took everyone aback that wow, that these young girls, or this young girl, had the presence of mind to take this video of potentially her killer.
By putting the family members on the stand today, I think it's important to point out that jurors are from 2 hours away. They're from Allen County.
Right.
They have not lived here for the last 7.5 years, since Abby and Libby went missing, since their bodies were found. The intense pain felt in this community is something that I think that the prosecutor wanted to introduce today to the jurors, to help them understand some of that pain that the family was feeling, to try again to humanize these two young girls, these teenagers who were murdered, to help them give insight into who they were, and to bring them somewhat into this community on the first day of this trial, to understand what those days, especially right around their disappearance and their murders, were like here.
And if you talk to members of this community, as we have in over these past several years, they'll tell you that these murders changed this community, that this went from a town, this is a small, quaint bedroom community where people often used to sleep with their doors unlocked, and that's how they felt about things, and they didn't mind letting their children go to walk in the woods on the Monon High Bridge. But if you talk to young people here today that are around the ages that Libby and Abby would be, they will tell you that things changed for them as teenagers after the girls were murdered, that their parents suddenly were not willing to just let them go and have kind of a freedom. They wanted to know, where they were and to check in all the time. And they just, life really, really changed for them as young people. Certainly. I've heard that over and over. And then the community as a whole, there was just a sense of safety, I think, that you heard people talk about over and over again, that was just then gone.
Right. And Emily, it's important to point out, and I want to remind our viewers, literally from the night that these two young girls went missing, you were here that night when the search was going on. This has been going on. I mean, this pain that the community's been feeling has been going on a long time.
A long time. And then that next day, and going to the school before it had come out to, that their bodies had been found, just going and talking to the school administrator and some of the teachers and how worried they were. And then, of course, the terrible news coming out and the church service that night. And it was, I distinctly remember it was painful. You could see the pain on people's faces and the fear, quite frankly, because again, it just rocked people's worlds here
Right.
that I remember.
We started at 9 o'clock this morning. We started a little bit late. The judge came into the courtroom. She apologized for things running a little bit behind. We got started, I think it was 11 minutes after 9 o'clock. The judge started on not a very happy note.
Not so much.
She pointed out that she had barred, I believe it is 4 separate journalists from attending this trial for the entirety, the rest of the trial, because there were several journalists who did not carefully read her decorum order, which bars the media from not only getting video of the jurors, we want to protect their
Right.
identity, but not
Absolutely.
even getting video of their vans when they
Coming.
pull up, coming
Right.
in and out of the courthouse. And some of the sheriff's deputies noticed this morning that there were 4 still and television cameras that were recording them as they pulled up to the courthouse. The judge isn't going to put up with that at all.
No.
So she actually seized the camera equipment,
Right.
the batteries, the SIM cards,
Right.
and announced
Wow.
first thing this morning that those journalists will not be allowed back into this trial.
Right.
So she's trying to set a very clear tone.
Right.
She wants the she wants to make sure that things are done right here, and
Right.
that the jurors, their privacy and their safety is first and foremost.
Right. You know, as she was excusing them for the day, she told them to go have a safe and peaceful night, that they were collecting their notebooks, that they were not to talk about, you know, after they left the court, to talk even amongst each other about, you know, the testimony today, and that they would get their notebooks back when they returned in the morning. But
And if I'm correct, things broke right around 5 o'clock.
right around
Is that
5 o'clock,
correct?
yes.
Which is probably a little earlier than what we're going to be seeing on some days. The judge did say that she's going to kind of gauge how the jury is doing each day.
Right.
We know there's going to be some really difficult evidence and testimony coming up, especially when the jury needs to see the crime scene photograph. She said on those days we might break a little bit early, but we expect, we might be going between 6 and 7 every day. Today we broke a little early,
Right.
probably again easing the jury into things a little bit.
And as she broke, then it gave the media that was in there, that was part of the media pool, a chance to go and look at some of the exhibits. You know, as you know, we've wanted to see some of these exhibits that had already been entered into public record. So we got a chance to do that and see the exhibits. And one was the state exhibit, was a picture of Abby and Libby in the car on their way to the bridge. It was a selfie taken. It looked by Libby, who was in the front seat. She was wearing a tie-dye shirt, and in the back seat, there was Abby with her, you know, hair in a messy bun, and they were, you know, getting ready for a day out in the woods. It was a day off school. They had the day off school. It was unseasonably warm that day in February. It was a beautiful day. So to see that picture, and then you saw another picture that the defense had entered in as an exhibit, and was a picture that Libby took of Abby on that Monon High Bridge there walking.
And again, we had huge
maps,
huge posters, and to set the scene, an aerial of the Monon High Bridge, and the witnesses, particularly Libby's family, was asked to come up and show the jury on the map where they went out to search, where the girls were dropped off. There was that video, again, allowing the jury to see the actual trail and the bridge, wanting to, again, try to put these jurors at the scene, and there's going to be probably a lot more of that coming in the days ahead.
Yeah, and the last witness they had was the sheriff for Carroll County, sheriff's deputy, for Carroll County, Cantron, Deputy Mitchell Cantron. He was the last witness of the day, and he talked about, he was the one that got the call from dispatch around 5:15 that day, and was connected to Mike Patty on the phone. And Mike Patty was telling him, look, 2 girls are missing. They went out in the woods. They were supposed to meet family at a specific time. They didn't. It's getting dark. We're concerned. And Deputy Cantron testified and got up and showed on the map, okay, here's where I drove out. Here's where I searched, kind of in an area, he said, like 5 to 7 minutes under the Monon High Bridge. He didn't see anything. He got out of his car. He looked around a little bit. It was not a long time. He said 5 to 7 minutes, and then he drove down a private drive that led to a man's property, Mr. Weber, and that he, knocked on the door and told this man, "Hey, look, these 2 girls are missing. Can I search your property? And this is private property." And the man said, "Sure, go ahead." And he searched the property, but the defense kept asking, "Did you search the outbuildings? There were 2 other buildings on this man's property. Did you search those?" And he said no. But basically, he said he didn't. What he said was, quote, "Nothing stuck out." And then he said in the days following, he was in charge of following up on some of the tips that came in, and he told the jury he got no tips about Richard Allen.
Scott, we want to let you and our jurors know also just the demeanor of Richard Allen in court today. We were sitting maybe 10 feet just behind Richard Allen. We were right in the first row of the courtroom, right behind the defense and Richard Allen. He was wearing the same outfit he wore on the first day of jury selection on Monday. It was a light purple shirt, khaki pants, nice belt and shoes, not the prison jumpsuit that we've seen him wearing for most of the last 2 years since he was arrested. Of course, in a trial like this, the defendant is allowed to come in looking like they would normally look, not coming in shackles. Right. So he started out right before the judge and right before the jury came into the courtroom. We saw him put his head down and he prayed for a moment. We saw him at one point get teary-eyed when they were talking about his family and his marriage and how it's been impacted. So again, we're going to be over the next few days, we are going to be in that first row again. 13 News was given media credentials to be there for today, for tomorrow, for Monday. And our intention is to be in the courtroom, Scott, throughout this entire trial, to be able to bring firsthand accounts of what happens here in Delphi.
That is incredible insight, and we are so fortunate that both Bob and Emily at certain points of today's first day of testimony were inside that courtroom. Thanks so much for giving us that input. And these are 2 reporters that know this case so well because they have covered it for 7 years. Thanks to you both there in Carroll County. Well, we want to bring in Katie Jackson-Lindsay, who's our legal expert. Want to thank you for coming in tonight. So let's talk a little bit about what we've just heard Bob and Emily talk about as they summarize day one. What was the most important thing that you heard the jury hear today from the 2 sides?
Well, I think the most important thing that they heard today that they are probably wrapping their minds around is what they heard in opening statements. Each of the individual witnesses and the testimony they provided is certainly important, but those are little pieces of the bigger picture. So the most important thing would be the overview from each side, both the state and the defense, in terms of what they expect the jury to see and to keep an eye out for.
What do we know about, based on the opening statements for both the prosecution and the defense, in terms of their strategies moving forward in terms of shaping this case that they want the jury to hear?
Well, as far as the prosecution, I think that we can be pretty certain at this point that their strategy is pretty basic, and it should be, right? Because their strategy should simply be to reveal the truth, and their truth should be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. And so their strategy, it seems, is to just simply present their case, put on their evidence, and meet their burden. As far as the defense, I think that we got a very clear picture of their strategy today, and their strategy from the start is to challenge that evidence. They gave us a very good idea of some of the high-level details of the big pieces of evidence that are going to be critical to their defense and critical to really imparting on this jury that the state can't meet their burden. And so just clearly from the outset, their strategy is to show this jury that the state cannot meet that burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
All right. Obviously, you try cases and you shape cases. Explain to our audience why the state would go ahead and put on family members right out of the gate to begin talking about these 2 young girls. Why not go right into evidence? Why put the family members on the witness stand to talk first?
Well, there are both technical legal reasons for that as well as strategic reasons. So in terms of the technical legal reasons, they have to prove that Richard Allen knowingly killed these girls. And along with that element of knowingly killed is having to prove that they were once alive. And so in every case, there's a next of kin witness who talks about that person in life just to establish that they were once alive. And that seems like a very simple and obvious thing, but it's something that the law requires. So you often in murder trials hear from a next of kin witness first. The other strategic benefit to that is that you are introducing your victim to the jury from the outset. This jury is going to hear the most gruesome things about the last day of these girls' lives. And so it's important that the jury gets to hear who they were before that day and to have some sort of emotional attachment to them as actual humans. And so there's that strategic part and that legal part, but also in this case, these family members are also fact witnesses, which is not often the case. Usually family members weren't there. They're not eyewitnesses. They may not have anything to offer in a typical murder case. But in this case in particular, they are a part of the story. They are the last people to see these girls, to talk with them, and to really understand what the girls' plans were versus what happened. And they also participated in the search. So they are also critical fact witnesses that introduce the story because they were there that day.
And as Bob and Emily summarized in their storytelling tonight, this jury is from Allen County, the Fort Wayne area. So they don't really know Carroll County and Delphi. And so maybe that's part of it as well.
Sure, absolutely. And again, as Bob highlighted, this jury is not as attached to this community, right? When you are speaking to a jury who is from the community where the crime occurred, they just have a different attachment and connection to the community and to their neighbors. These girls are not neighbors of these jurors. And so again, it's really important that they humanize it and that these witnesses also set the scene for what that bridge was like. We heard from Bob and Emily that they provided testimony in terms of the scene itself, the terrain. We also know that there was some testimony that came out about how difficult it would have been to run on this bridge, across this bridge. So to a certain extent, these family member witnesses are experts in their community, and they can really give the jury a sense of what that's like and really allow them to put themselves in that scene.
So let's talk about the opening statement. So the defense, they lasted about 3 times as long as the prosecution. So what do we learn from that?
Well, I think that's interesting in terms of strategy. As a defense attorney, I go into a trial knowing I don't have the burden of proof. And so at the juncture of that opening statement, I don't have to convince the jury of anything. And so you typically see a scenario where defense's opening statements are a more broad overview and reminding the jury to keep an open mind. Well, we saw the opposite of that today. The state gave a broad overview. The state gave a very brief summary of what they expect their evidence to show. And it was the defense that went into more detail. So I think what that signals to us is the defense's confidence that the state really has some problems with their evidence and there are going to be some serious challenges to this evidence.
Yeah.
And they were comfortable enough to put it on the table from the outset. And now the state is sort of on defense.
Yeah, the defense basically said the state's case messed up from the very beginning. They attacked, they talked about the witnesses, the phone data, and the so-called magic bullet that was found at the crime scene. So what did you think of those details being laid out?
Well, I think it was strategically brilliant to lay out those details. The defense attorney who delivered the opening statement, Andy Baldwin, he's a very skilled trial lawyer. And he knows that you can't go in front of a jury from the outset and make promises that you can't keep. And so I think that signals to us that he knows there are going to be problems that the state cannot fix. Another thing that I think that did for the defense that was strategically very important was it let the jury know at that moment, this is the evidence the state has today. He said things such as, well, I haven't been provided that, but maybe they'll show it to you. He also signaled to the jury that this investigation must have been quote unquote messed up because they are in fact still investigating. He mentioned that just 2 days ago, there were things that were still happening in the investigation. So presumably the state is still working on things that they're going to try to fix throughout the course of the trial. But based on defense's opening statement, they now know with certainty that there were some things they didn't have when the case started.
Yeah, the prosecution's first witness this morning was Libby's grandmother. Richard Allen didn't come up once in her testimony. Is that unusual? What do you make of that?
No, I don't think that's unusual considering the nature of her testimony. Based on what we now know that she knew, she wouldn't have any idea about the suspect or the killer or who did this to her granddaughter. And so I didn't think that was unusual at all. And in fact, ironically, I think we will find that most witnesses will never mention Richard Allen, that it will more so be a combination of the state's evidence that points to Richard Allen, and the state will have a responsibility to tie all that up and make that make sense for the jury.
So the prosecution says that Richard Allen abducted and killed the girls, left Libby's phone at the scene, and never returned. But the defense said Richard Allen and the girls were never on the trail at the same time. So why is the timeline critical to both of these cases here?
The timeline is so critical because in order for Richard Allen to be guilty, they had to be there at the same time. And so I think that was another one of those bombshell revelations today where the state's evidence is obviously in conflict with how the defense interprets that evidence. Because in order for this to happen, in order for him to be the killer, he would have had to have been there with them at the time they were there. And according to the defense, we can expect that the state's not going to be able to show that.
At some point, this jury is going to see photos of the crime scene. And that's going to be very difficult for these people to hear.
Sure. For anyone who has developed a brain or spinal tumor after using birth control shots, this is
Sorry.
How do you lay that out for this jury to see?
I put y'all a poll
if you
up there.
are the prosecution?
Do you think?
I think there's no
Richard
easy
Allen
way
is rich
to
guy?
do that. I think that we would have to assume that during jury selection, there were a lot of questions about, is this something that you can stomach? Is this something that you can keep an open mind about? You see that in any homicide trial, whether it's gruesome or it's just simply autopsy photos. And so I don't think there's any easy way for the state to do that. And they have to do that with some sense of sensitivity because they know that the girl's family members are there. But it's one of those unfortunate pieces of evidence that you just have to do it because it's a part of the big picture. It is the big picture.
All right, last question tonight. We know this is going to be a long trial. Judge has indicated maybe a month or longer. Today's just day one. Do you see any scenario that would put Richard Allen on the witness stand at any point during this trial? Do you feel like he will be called?
I would guess not. I know as a defense attorney, you absolutely do not want to call your witness at trial, your client at trial unless you absolutely have to. And a lot goes into that analysis and that consideration. And so what you're going to see the defense doing the entire time is trying to tell Richard Allen's story without having to actually put Richard Allen on the stand. The other added challenge they have here is that we know that this judge has ruled that Richard Allen's alleged confessions that he made while in the Department of Correction pre-trial are going to come into trial. And to some extent, I think that poses an even bigger challenge in that analysis as to whether or not to put him on the stand because the defense has taken the position that he made those statements while under duress and while not in a good mental state. And so if you consider that, he can't even testify about making those statements because he wasn't even in the proper mental state to know that he was making them. So I would assume that we probably won't hear from Richard Allen, but what I can tell you, having been a defense attorney for a long time, is that's typically a last minute decision. And it's important to remember that it's Richard Allen's decision to make. His attorneys can advise him, but ultimately he has to make that decision.
All right. Good to see you. Thank you again for coming in and helping our viewers understand this complex case that is going to be going on for the weeks to come. Katie Jackson Lindsay will be with me every week.
All right. Let's stop sharing that now. Okay. So how many of you all think that Richard Allen will take the stand? Do you think he'll testify? I know that that's a kind of what she said. They usually don't make that decision until later at the end of the trial, or whenever the time comes. But I kind of look at taking the stand two different ways. So usually, if you're really innocent, the jury wants to hear from you. I think, this is just my opinion, but I think the jury really likes to hear from people who are, who are claiming their innocence, because they want to kind of get a feel for what their personality is like. But so many people think that they are good at, they think they're the smartest person in the room, and if they're lying, they think that they're pretty good liars. So I don't know, even if somebody is innocent, sometimes when they take the stand, they're just not likable. Um, we got to remember that the criminal justice system is a people system. Everybody in there is people. So you've got the jury is made up of human beings, the judge, and the lawyers. And I personally think that these lawyers for the defense, I think they're going to come across pretty well. I've watched them in some other news stories, and I think they're pretty likable people. I think that prosecutor is not, though. Well, let's go look and see, everybody. Thank you. If you've not subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. If you like the video, It gives us a little bump on the algorithm, the YouTube algorithm. I'm going to be purchasing some streaming software and stuff, so we're going to upgrade our channel a little bit, y'all. So hopefully it'll be a little bit more professional. Let's see. We got Magenta Trauma in the house. Thank you for coming. We love it when all of you are here. The one who knows. Let's see. 1905 is Bridge Guy. I was reading that. I have named a suspect in this case on 7/23/17. Let's see. We'll have to, and it's not Richard Allen. I don't think Richard Allen did it. I really don't. So he worked at the CVS, the local CVS. He was a pharmacy technician in that local CVS, and the picture of Bridge Guy and the sketches and everything hung up in that CVS. They had a photo back before the trial started of him sitting in front of those sketches. I just don't think he acted like a guilty person. He still had, if I'm not mistaken, I think that they reported that he still had the clothing that he wore that day. The hair that was in one of the girls' hands when they found her didn't match either her or either one of the girls. And then it didn't match Richard Allen either. And the way that this case unfolded, like they didn't have any leads, it didn't look like, until somebody started going back through the evidence and started going back through the case. And one of the statements that had been filled out, I guess it would have been Richard Allen's statement that he gave to the police. I think it was I guess it would have been the day that they reported him missing. I'm not sure when Richard Allen gave that statement. If anybody else knows, please let me know. So they started going back through, and they found the statement of the cop that Richard Allen had spoken to, and they said it had been misfiled somehow. And so they found this just recently. And then so then the case heated up and they got on Richard Allen's case real bad. That's when they served the search warrants on his house. Let's see what everybody else says. Buckwheat, I doubt he will testify. There is a very long way for this trial. What are we at day 3 and predicted 30? I wish we had cameras in there. The trial is not about the jury. And there you have it. Let's see. Thanks, honey. Buckwheat. Paulette Kelly. That's what the jurors said. They feel he should be called to the stand. I don't trust tricky attorneys. Sad he has the right to remain silent. The hair matches the girl's family member. I heard it was an unknown female. That's very interesting, isn't it? Well, listen, I'll just say that if they can convict this man on what little bit of evidence, I guess it would be circumstantial. I don't think they have any real direct evidence against him, do they? I don't think they do. Everything is circumstantial. And just like that lady just said, reasonable doubt is all through this case. If they can convict someone on such little evidence, they can do that to any of us. That should be very scary. That should be very terrifying for all of us. Let's see. I wish we were able to watch the trial, but we're not going to be able to. So the only thing that we're going to be able to do is just kind of watch the reporters who are actually there. We're going to have to rely on their reporting for the case, I guess. I am going to start covering tomorrow. I think I'm going to start. We're going to start watching the trial for the suitcase red rum. If anybody else is covering that, I'm a trial junkie. I sit and I watch all these trials all the time. They just asked her family member this week for her DNA to confirm it, which is crazy to think it took them this long. And look how they've had him in jail. Like, they haven't even had him in a regular jail. They've had him transferred to a max prison. His weight, like his appearance has changed 180 degrees. There's just been so many like red herrings. They've got this theory that it was some kind of a devil worshiping ritual. So I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure about any of it. It's just so crazy. I don't know. Does anybody else have anything to say about this one? Or we'll leave this kind of update where it's at. Let's see. 71% so far say no on the poll. So 71% of our chat, anyway, does not believe that Richard Allen is bridge guy. We'll go ahead and end that poll. And we'll just have to keep up with it. We'll keep up with it this week and see. And we'll see. 7 votes. 71% say no. 28% say yes. All right. There we go. Love bug. Yay! Does that mean you became a member? Is that right? I think so. Yay. All right. Yeah, remember guys, we've got memberships now. So if any of y'all want to become a member of the Hillbilly family, you can become a member. I'm learning as I go. And we'll have us some better streaming software this week. I'm gonna figure out which one's the best, and we'll figure it out. But well, I sure appreciate y'all coming on. I had a little something different planned for today, but like I said, that virus thing really freaked me out today. It got me way out of whack. But so tomorrow I'm going to start covering the suitcase trial and a couple other trials that are going on right now. And if any of you guys have any requests, or if you have any cases that you want us to look at, let us know. Jump on our community page and let me know, and I'll start doing some work. Okay. All right, y'all. Well, it's late, and we've all got school in the morning. So we'll see you tomorrow, and we'll pick up on the suitcase trial. Okay. All right, y'all. Thank you, Love Bug, and I will be reaching out to you. Okay. Thank you for becoming a member. Thank you for the super chat, LS, and thank you for coming, everybody. And we'll see you tomorrow. Okay. All right, y'all. Have a good evening.